Everybody, and we are back. We are talking how working full time still just puts you farther behind. And working full time, we have a meeting every single Sunday. If you want to check the Discord, Susanna. If you're working full time and still falling behind, life feels like walking in the mud. And we're not talking left versus right. It's just that you notice something, right? How much control does money have over your freedom? That is crazy. That's what I keep thinking about is if we all had more money, we'd feel more free. And the little test I use is if you could quit your job on Monday, could you survive 3 months? Let me get a 1 for yes, 2 for a no. If you had to quit your job on Monday, could you survive for 3 months? 1 for yes, 2 for no. I want to hear how economically free everybody feels. Yeah, I'm with the twos as well. Because it basically comes down to Otis. Thank you, my friend. Thank you very much, Susie. Because if most people can't quit on Monday, you're not free. If you can't leave a bad situation, you're screwed, right? And I think that's how most of us feel. We have to work the majority of our waking hours just for what we need for survival, right? And it's so frustrating because we don't feel that security. And it's like we don't even think about it, though. It's just we're so conditioned to go to our job, to wake up at 7 or 8 in the morning, to leave our children, to leave our family, to go make money for somebody else and not even recognize that that person that we're working for completely, we depend on them completely. Because that's what's so crazy is even while I was building my business, you still don't feel free. Even after the business was going successfully, you still don't feel free, right? And that was why I started my business, was because I wanted to get out of the damn rat race. You want freedom from time, you want financial freedom, and basically to feel that you're not constantly scrambling, right? And that's what it is, Otis. Everybody feels like we're constantly scrambling because we have to work the majority of our waking hours just for what we need to survive, right? So when you're always one expense away from getting screwed over, I literally remember thinking to myself, like, I have had all the privilege in the world to be able to start this business, all of this. And if this is what all this privilege gets you, how can anybody survive on less? That's literally what it feels like. Because that was before my business got suspected. Now the business is successful. The business is expanding, multiple locations, lots of employees, and I actually have savings, right? You can make it to the next month and your brain gets rewired. That's what we don't understand, is that when you are not in this constant survival mode of having to go do things in order to survive, your nervous system actually calms down. It changes. You don't have that stress in your chest all the time. Not every single decision feels like it's survival. You don't feel like you're trapped. Dignity is the exact word that I use. Because that's what happens. Most of us don't even have the ability to quit our job on Monday, but we don't realize that means we're not free. Let's do it again. If you can quit your job on Monday and you've got 3 months of savings, type a 1 in the chat. Now let's hear the twos. If you can't do that, let's get a 2 in the chat. Because damn, they make us feel like we're living our life, right? Completely normal. Like this is the way it's supposed to be. But no, that's not the way it's supposed to be. Not at all. Because when you're living on the brink, you don't feel free, right? You're stuck. You can't quit your job on Monday. And here's what's crazy. People say, go learn a new skill, go move somewhere else. But shit, we just talked about it. How can you risk learning a new skill if you don't have anything? You can't even tell your boss no. You don't even have time to think. Why do you think we all just plop down and doom scroll, right? Because here's what really bothers me, right, Caleb? If you're working 40 hours a week, if you are, because you're awake for like 100, 60 hours, there's 160 hours in the week, you're awake for 40 of them, you're asleep for 40 of them, you've got about 40 other hours, 50 other hours. And if you are spending the majority of your waking hours just trying to survive, you never ask yourself, why are things this way, right? You never have time to ask why. Were they always this way? How did they get to be this way, right? We're not thinking about systems. You think about rent. You think about food. You check your bank account before you go to the grocery store. Broke people can't change the system. That's all it comes down to. If you have to spend the majority of your waking hours fighting for survival, then you can't fight for change. Chad, it's good to see you, my friend. That's what it comes down to. If you have to spend the majority of time you are awake fighting for survival, we can't fight for change. Broke people don't change systems. Broke people just try to survive, right? The system depends on that. If we all actually had a cushion, how many people would tolerate the bullshit that we go through? But because we don't have any savings, God, we have to tolerate the bullshit. SB Forever, appreciate you. This is an economic pushback group where we were like, hey, we need to start boycotting. We need to start striking. We need to do something to push back. Because it's not just the politicians that are working against us now. Politicians and corporations have worked together to really screw us because they figured out that if they keep us broke economically, we'll always be stuck politically. Because then you have to spend most of your time just trying to survive and not trying to fight for change. And then SB Forever. I've got a little explanation why. We're going to talk about that. We're going to go through what the ultra wealthy have done to screw us. And then we're going to talk about that fun thing, the steps forward that we're taking to fix it. So, because what it really is, and this is not a political issue, right? I think we can all tell that the left versus right is a distraction so that we don't figure out what we just talked about, right? Is that if everybody had savings, if everybody had a real cushion, we would not tolerate this. So it's not red versus blue. It's people who have all the pressure of having to survive versus the ultra wealthy who don't. And we've normalized a state of living in a constant state of struggling to survive. We think it's normal, right? People are like, oh, this is just adulthood. This is just the way it's always been. No, it hasn't been. The previous generation didn't have to deal with this. The greatest generation certainly didn't. Here's what it is, though. If you're born into a system where you're always stressed, where are my 80s babies at? We were born into this corporate bullshit. Type in some 80s babies. Come on, type in what year. Give me the year you were born. Because us 80s babies, we were born into the corporate bullshit, right? We've never seen a different system. People before us, they saw hints of a different system. But what it really happens is when you are born into this, 87 right here, Negotiable, when you are born into this and you keep people stressed long enough, they don't think about the structure, right? They can't ask deeper questions. What do? Just try to make it till Friday. Fuck. Why do you think? They literally reset the clock on us. Thank God it's Friday. Reset it. Don't think about your situation. Don't think about why you can't afford housing. Don't think about why you can't afford groceries. And shit, they know we won't think about it because we are too tired. We are too exhausted and we are too stuck thinking about how we can survive, right? Yo, that's not laziness, y'all. That's not laziness. That's us trying to survive. Gosh, and then here's what it comes down to. I'm a business owner, and every business owner has to make a choice. You either try to squeeze every dollar out of your employees, or you pay them enough so they get out of survival mode. and you understand that when people aren't stuck in survival mode, they can actually start building for you and for themselves because they have security. Because when people are secure, they actually think clearly. When people have food and housing and healthcare, they can innovate. They can take risks. Secure people stay at their job. But if you underpay people, yeah, you might make a little bit of money in the short term, but you're going to lose trust in the long term, right? And that's all it asks is, why can somebody work for a 40-hour a week for a successful company and still not be successful? All we want is that if a company is successful, its employees should be too. So basically, why is the average person working 40 hours and still falling farther behind? Well, let me tell you, that shit is factual. It's because of math, right? We hear all the time, facts over feelings. Well, here's some math for you, right? Here's some facts over what people feel, because this is the truth. The average salary and the average cost of living are almost the freaking same. That's what it really comes down to, is that the average salary, 63 to 72 grand, depending on where you're at. The average salary is the same as the average cost of living. If it takes you 1 year to save up a 1 month of emergency fund, you're not free. You're stuck, right? If it takes you 1 year to save up 1 month of an emergency fund, you're not free. You're stuck, right? Money has control over your freedom. And most people can't quit on Monday, right? And this isn't politics. This isn't left versus right. It's that if they keep the pressure on us, we're constantly scrambling and we can't think about how to actually make change. Ready? People that are broke are only thinking about survival. And if you keep people broke, they'll never be able to create change, right? Excuse me. And that's what this is. We don't even have time to think. If you are spending the majority of your waking hours struggling for survival with food, housing, healthcare, trying to get what little human connection you can, well, then you're not going to have enough energy to think about why, right? Because we're just exhausted. And that's where it pisses me off so bad, Afro, when then people go, oh, well, people are just lazy. If you gave people the things that they need, they would just be lazy. No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't accept this bullshit. That's it. If everyone had 3 months of savings, every single work culture and workplace would change overnight, because we wouldn't be afraid of saying no. The only reason we don't say no is because we can't. We literally can't. Who remembers being a kid and having to do those chores for your parents? Chores. But if you said no to those chores, you weren't getting dinner, right? So if you either have to do something or you don't get what you need to survive, it's not an option, right? You're dependent on that. And that's exactly what this is. Well, the reason it feels like that is because we are so dependent on them. So many people want this change. Here's the big question. How is it that we've got 70 million people vote against this, another 80 million people that didn't vote at all, but a good, 30% of the population, 70, 80 million people can decide this horrible aspect, right? Or decide this future for us. Well, that's because 30% of people have a billionaire's hand, a thumb on the scale, right? They don't really want to be living in this society. The majority of us don't. But the 30% that are brainwashed have a billionaire's thumb on the scale, right? And every single time we bring this up, what do they say? It's your fault. You made a bad choice. right? Oh, it's that person's fault. It's that. They point fingers, even though this has been going on for so long. And if you keep people stressed enough, if you keep them living in this annoying state of anxiety, they just think that this is what life is like, right? Not only that, but people, not at all AC times 3, both sides, both parties are two sides of the same coin. And that coin is in a billionaire's pocket. They're basically just good cop, bad cop. One of them actively hurts us, and the other one goes, no, stop. They don't actually care. And hell no, we ain't running away somewhere else. That's what they want. Because honestly, they're trying to keep us confused. They're trying to keep us in a state of fog because the answer is not difficult. This is like we are in the Wizard of Oz. Afro, it's just they would have to have no CPAC, no corporate money. And what it is in order to be a politician in the first place, you have to play by the game. But yes, it is very few and far between, but that needs to be the majority. When those people are the only ones speaking out, it sounds like controlled opposition to me because they know, yeah, they can speak out, but the tiger's in a cage. They're too boxed in. So that's what they know. They will allow us to speak out because they know that we're so boxed in economically that we are stuck politically. Because here's what it comes down to. 2 things, striking and boycotting. That's how we fix it. Striking and boycotting. But in order for strikes to be effective, the majority of Americans have to have economic independence or a way to survive outside of the system. In order for a boycott to be effective, we need to have non-corporate or local options. But right now, not many Americans have the savings or the ability to strike, and there are not enough non-corporate options. So you can't boycott, you can't strike, you can't go work somewhere else. And it's not because we're weak, it's because we're stuck, because we need to eat food, right? And that's what's so crazy, is even if there is 1 million people protesting, they still have to go back to their same job on Monday. User, I'm a business owner with over 30 employees. I actually figured this out when I got successful with my business. Erica, that is a huge part of what we are doing. And it's understanding that, oh shit, constantly being in survival mode actually changes your brain. And the moment that people actually have savings and enough to have security, life is different. So the people up top want to make sure that we don't have security, because if we did what we were talking about earlier, imagine if everybody had 3 months of savings. If you could quit your job tomorrow and you'd have 3 months of savings, right? We wouldn't take their shit anymore. That's what it really comes down to. We accept these terrible conditions because we have to. Because if we didn't say yes, sir, or yes, ma'am, and keep on working, we wouldn't have food for our kids. We wouldn't have housing. We wouldn't have health care. So all that we're saying is, damn, what happened to the majority of people having 6 months of savings? And I think the fact that when the majority of people have 6 months of savings and they know that we can say, screw this, we're going to go take a month vacation before we come back. You either make this shit work better, make it work for us instead of against us, or else we're going to go somewhere else. So they made sure to do 2 things. They got rid of our ability to go somewhere else. There is no more competition that can actually compete with the corporations. And then on top of that, they made sure we didn't have the economic independence to be able to actually effectively strike. And that's where it's not a political issue. It's up versus down, and they want us fighting over every other topic because the more we are divided, the less that we'll figure out the cure. That's all it really comes down to. The more we are divided, the less that we will work together going towards a cure. It's almost like some of us think there's an earache and some of us think there's a backache and some of us think it's a hamstring problem. And if we all think it's those different physical ailments, we're all going to work towards a different cure. So that's part of why we can't do it, why we can't fix it. The main reason why we can't fix it is because we're too dependent. We are way too dependent. We are like 12-year-olds going to our parents, asking them to change. Telling, hey, you change this or we're going to leave. The parents go, okay, see you in a couple hours when you get cold. See you in a couple hours when you need food. You're dependent on us, right? That's what it really comes down to. So what we need is we need to take some leverage back. That's what this is really all about, leverage. Because if you don't have savings, we don't have leverage. If we don't have non-corporate options, we don't have leverage, right? So we have to say yes. That's why we tolerate their bullshit. Not because we're weak, because we need to eat food. Because we need to live in a house, right? So we still pay rent, we still pay utilities, we yell on Sunday, and then we go back to work on Monday. So power isn't us gathering together and getting as many people in the streets as we can. We first need to control the food. That's what it is. We need to control our food and our housing and our health care. Because what do they say? They say an army runs on its stomach. Well, a nation does too. If you control what people need to eat, you're not arguing with them. You're telling them what to do, right? So what we need to do is understand that we are actually the people that provide all of the essentials. Think about it. Corporations don't actually do anything. So if you're just joining, we're talking about how 40 hours a week doesn't give you enough anymore. Because if you are broke, if you don't have any money, then you are just thinking about survival. You're not thinking about change. And they figured out that if the majority of us are stuck fighting for survival, we'll never be able to fight for a better life. So that's why we don't have savings. That's why they got rid of all the mom and pop shops and all the local stores. Because our economic situation greatly affects our political ones. That's what it is. Not really. Because you might not agree with the people on the other side, but when you build something that works for people instead of against them, you don't have to convince them, right? They simply start using what works for them. I say it's like a car and a horse, right? You don't have to convince somebody to start using a car. They just see, oh, that works better for me. That's what it really comes down to. So working 40 hours a week, they make sure that we don't have savings. Because if you don't have savings, we don't have any leverage. That's what this is. So Afro, we'll talk about that later. So much of it comes down to language and brainwashing. So what actually changes this? It's not just protesting. It's not just putting pressure on the system, but it's also not just building alternatives, right? It has to be both. The protest gets the word out there. The protest brings people, but pressure brings alternatives, and it's alternatives that actually change things. So the protest needs to just be the first step. It cannot be what we are actually working towards. And absolutely, but we've got to build up to that national strike. Because the first thing that we need with a national strike is the ability to actually boycott. So we've got our national strike coming up April 5th. Blackout the System is apart with 100 other groups across the nation. And ours is coming in April 5th. And what that April 5th general strike will show everybody is that, yes, it puts pressure against the system, but it also shows a lot of people how much you depend on the system. It's for 30 days, April 5th for 30 days. But guess what? The majority of people cannot strike. They can't even boycott for 30 days, right? Join the Discord. They can't even boycott for 30 days. That's because it's not because people don't want to. It's because we don't have leverage. Leverage is the ability to choose where your hard work goes. That's what a strike is. Just having leverage over where your hard work goes. Same with a boycott. Boycott is just leverage over where your money goes, where you spend your money. So that's where corporations said, dang. But they know that we would need 3 months or 6 months of savings in order to strike, that people understand, dang, no matter how much I change my personal choices, there's nothing I can do, right? So this is not a ladder that we climb. So speaking out, whether that's sharing a post on social media, telling people about our weekly, makes people go, oh shit, I'm not the only one that feels this way. HKZ3X feels this way too. We Three Bumblebees feels this way too. Well, I'm going to start speaking out. And then mainly once enough people speak out, people start changing their personal choices, right? We try to not go to one of those and we do the very best we can. But then what happens next? We realize they've got us screwed, because no matter gasoline, cars, transportation, corporations, healthcare, corporations, electricity, corporations, your internet, corporations, electricity, corporations, everything we actually need, their personal choices. This is where we were all at after the first boycott, after the first blackout. We were like, hell yeah, we got millions of people, we're doing this, we're changing this. And then it's like, oh shit, we still rely on them for our food, for our housing, for our healthcare, for everything we actually need, unless we have actual non-corporate options that allow us to have any actual leverage. Because until we have a non-corporate alternative that works for us instead of against us, we are always going to be dependent on the corporations. Want to hear what I'm talking about? Cost plus drugs. Hiding its price, selling, call this business cost plus drugs. And what that signals, a real douchey thing to do, to sell you this and get rich off of it, right? Absolutely, Afro. So how do we do? Protest, form local groups. That's what this is really all about, forming local groups. Because when we form local groups, what can we do? We can start striking and boycotting effect. And look, there are going to be people that don't understand this, right? But we all know what's actually on. When somebody who's working their whole life just to survive has never had a chance to ask why or think about why the system puts them in this place, right?